All right, what's up, Rap Shot Talk? So today we got Matt Richart with Digital Effects, and he's an OG of this industry. Him in Dallas. Where are you guys located out of again?
We're in Louisville, Kentucky.
Louisville, Kentucky.
Louisville.
Louisville. Sorry, that's my.
No, you got no one gets it right unless you're from here, man. It's all
There you
good.
go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, how long have you guys been in business to date?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it. I know you and I have talked interactively on Facebook, Messenger, this and that. I think we've maybe met a couple times, but honored and privileged to be on here. I appreciate you having me on. But we just celebrated 20-year anniversary in this past October. So Dallas and I have been 20 years in the business so far with digital effects wraps. We probably have 5 or 6 years before that in the sign industry, but realistically, digital effects wraps 20 years, 20 years in the making, and hopefully we got 20 more. Sound like a married couple, dude, but we're hoping that we continue this journey forward. So uh, it's been quite an adventure and continues to be so.
I gotcha. I mean, 20 years in business. Have you guys been a partnership the entire time?
Yes, Dallas and I have been a partnership the entire time.
Now, how did you guys meet? Were you friends prior or what?
Not friends prior. Actually worked for a graphic company that decided that he wanted to do online retail graphics back in 2000, I'd say 2003. And I had come from a sign background and I told the guy, I said, I'm a young guy. I said, I don't know anything, but I don't think it's going to work. You need to go after, we got to go after commercial business. We got to go after plumbers and electricians. And I come from a boat background. That's how I got this business doing boat graphics and boat lettering when I
Mm.
was 19 years old. But anyways, long story short, we built the business up and we needed another designer and slash installer. And somebody had recommended a guy named Dallas from Florida that had an art design degree and could lay vinyl. And we brought Dallas in, and I had Dallas actually lay a couple of yard signs and put a decal just on a piece of aluminum and showed me his book. And long story short, the owner goes, "What do you think?" I was like, you don't find a lot of people that you're either a designer or you're an installer. You don't find two, and this is before wraps were even big, right? I mean, what even really happening much. So hired him. We worked there for about a year. I got tired of it. I went back and started working on the river in flip flops, installing boat lettering for $35,000 a year in cash. You know what I mean? I had a
Yeah.
$400 rent payment. My car was paid off, dude. I was eating steak every Friday night, living like a champ. So I realized too that I was not legal, had no business insurance, had a DBA at the bank. Tax time came. What was I going to do? I was buying prints at that point from Dallas and the company, and then I left. Dallas wanted to do his own thing. Found a business backer to start a company, and suggested that Dallas do it not by himself. That he find somebody. Dallas asked me if I wanted to, and we jumped, hopped and started the business back in 2000 and 2004 in a 30-foot by 20-foot building, no bathroom. We had no bathroom. That was an awkward conversation when a client had to take a one or two, and you had to escort them over to the stereo shop next door that our financial backer owned. When it rained in the building, it would fill up about 2 or 3 inches of water. So we literally had to build a foot tall deck in this warehouse, little building, and that was what the printer was on. That was what the laminator was on, because when it would rain, your jeans would wick up the water, right? So we literally had link boards going across the shop. Cool thing was is that you could design and look at the car at the same time, right? So you're literally
Mhm.
looking at the car. But we were there for about 5 years, and then we moved to another building for another 5 years, and we moved to another building for 10 years, and then we just did this building leasing to own back in last March. So we've been here almost a year at our new facility that we're owning. So it's been a journey. It's been interesting in a
That's
good way.
pretty cool. That's pretty cool to hear. So I mean, so you came back from the Edge days where you were doing the ribbon vinyl cutting and stuff with boat graphics because they love the 2 layer like metallic foils and stuff,
Oh, absolutely,
the
absolutely.
Gerber edges.
The
That
Gerber
that
Edge.
technology was insane
Oh,
for back then.
it was crazy. The guy that I worked for at a sign shop. This will date me too, man. I mean, I'm 48, but I designed a logo for a local elementary school. This sign shop needed the logo, in a vector format and couldn't email it for some reason. So I had to put it on a nice uh,
Flop.
iridescent clear floppy disk, dude, green. Drove it down to him, floppy disk artwork, gave it to him. It's the first time I ever seen a plotter. And his thing is cutting. I'm like, dude, what is that? Like, I kind of knew what it was. He's like, it's a plotter. And I sat there and watched that thing for 30 minutes and I was just
Mhm.
amazed. And I just said, it's kind of the same story you kind of told me a little bit about how you got in the rap business too. I said, are you hiring? He says, no, but maybe I am. And I showed him some of my design work. And next week I quit that company and came down and started doing decals. But a year into business, he bought a color cam, a Roland color cam, which is like a Gerber Edge. It's a ribbon based printer, loud as can be, and it would print beautiful gold metallics, silver metallics on film and everything. But you're right, everything was vinyl, cut vinyl. So I remember doing banners for the Kentucky Derby, 30-foot by 40-foot banner, and we would buy it pre-made, and I would install that on a 4x8 table, and I would grid it out. I would make lines, right? And I would literally hand lay the jockey black background and then the silk colors, and then the name, and then the name, and then I would shift the banner up, remeasure, and everything was based on quadrants. And it would take me, dude, 6, 7 days to install that banner. Back then, it was funny. Kinda you look at how what you used to do, and now you could have that banner printed and at your doorstep in 48 hours.
Yeah, people don't know how much technology has advanced in that regard. Because I remember on the Gerber, you had the big Rolodex of like all the versions or iterations of foils that you could do, and you had to pick. Like you couldn't put one color on top of another because some of it was translucent, and so it
Mhm.
shift the colors, and you have to show the customers like, hey, if I do black on gold, it's like this, but if I do gold on black, it's this way. Which do you prefer? And you had to be very careful with how you told that machine to cut.
Yes, yeah. I remember going on sales calls and, like, one time it was a moving company, and on the way there, I'm thinking, "Please, God, please be a simple logo." And we get up there and it would say Armstrong Moving, but the globe had the water, the silhouette of the continents, then it had the grid, and I'm thinking in my mind, "Okay, there's 4 pieces of vinyl to make his icon," right? And that was before I could you couldn't even really get anything subbed out, meaning there was probably year 4 or 5, you could purchase pre-printed graphics, which was amazing to me, but I heard I believe it was a UV technology, but that was the printers too that you had to prime and put a primer on there to help pull the ink through the line system, and, um, it just it's funny you ask these questions and it brings back memories of jobs. I mean, real quick, I remember one, they're out of business now, it's called Suncom. It was a cell phone company out of California. They came into town and I met them through doing a boat graphic, and they wanted me to do all their vehicles and door logos, but it was an orange and blue logo, but below their little swoosh had a drop shadow, a faded orange drop shadow with a gradient. Well, you can't gradient vinyl. So what I did was we actually cut the swoosh with the drop shadow in white, and then we would cover up the vinyl, but the drop shadow actually airbrushed with spray paint and faded it in with orange and then hit it with frog juice. You remember the old liquid lamination? Dude, it would take us 3 days to do 5 door logos. I mean, it was insane. But that's kind of the stuff you look back on and it just made you learn on the job. You know what I mean? Like everybody in this industry really, I mean, you can take all the training that you want, you can do all the online courses, which is great, but being in the mud, being in the trenches, learning from your mistakes, doing stuff you shouldn't be doing, for a long time. And figuring out that way, I think that's what makes people successful. I think that's what makes people talented. I mean, Brent, I mean, the biggest thing I think in this game is how do you fix your mistakes?
It's critical thinking at all times. Like
That's a good point.
I I get in trouble a lot. I actually quite enjoy like silence and just sitting with myself and thinking. And so fortunately that kind of plays into my strength, but it gets me in trouble with like people or social settings because people are like when I do, apparently my face also turns off and I have a horrible RBF. And so my girlfriend would be like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Nothing. I'm just thinking." But like I go in my head. I don't like so there's nothing on my face at all. But I think business teaches you just massive critical thinking skills to where, you can solve problems, and there's sometimes, even sometimes you don't have an answer to a problem, like there is no good answer, and you have to think of the best way to deliver and package that problem to the customer to where they're good with it.
Yeah. No, that's
And
very yeah.
so that's a skill in itself. But 20 years in business, you got a lot of us beat, man. Like what would you say, if you were to recall, was the first real big, like, because when you get in business, like you're kind of high on the hog, like you're like, man, I'm the man. Like I'm my own boss now. And you obviously got a lot of lessons with that first shop. I mean, I couldn't imagine having to work where you couldn't even have electrical cord laying across the ground really when it rained. um what would you say was the first, like, reality check that business wasn't like massive fun and games, like shit hit the fan or the ox was in the ditch, if you will?
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, well, back to it too. I think for me personally, and I've written about this too, I think a lot of us when we start out in business, we're driven by fear. Fear of going out of business, right? Fear of losing a customer, fear of not being able to make your payroll, right? Or fear of not being able to pay your monthly rent or your electric bill or utilities bills. And that kind of what drives you to work 50, 60, 70 hours a week. It's your baby, right? You've heard that, Sam. It's your business is your baby. You treat your baby different than you do your brother. You treat your kids and your baby different, and maybe even you treat your spouse or your better half. Um, so we laugh all the time when Dallas and I first started. And I've been using the word transparency big this past year with my team and my family and everything else. That transparent doesn't mean just vomit of the mouth and tell everybody your secret details, but I've found that transparency has really fixed a lot of things with the business and how I'm trying to lead as a leader of transparency. And what I'm getting at with that is that transparency is Dallas and I laugh at we got paid $350 a week back in 2004. Dallas got paid 350 every Friday. I got paid 350 every Friday. And we laughed because there was no taxes taken out. We were writing a check from our account for 350. Luckily, I don't know how in the world we were living off $1,400. Uh, 18 grand. Thank you, Brent. I really appreciate you. You're just like me, dude. That's someone goes, it's $40 a month. I'm like, you timed it by 12. You know what I mean? Like it's 480. Like it's but and then getting paid that. I remember our first wrap we did. It took us 5 days, man. Van came in on Monday. We washed it, detailed it, sized it up, started praying. Prints weren't done till Tuesday, laminated till midnight, started installing it on Wednesday night till 2 a.m., Thursday till 2 a.m., Friday finishing up. Guy came back then. I think the full van wrap was like 3,100 bucks, $3,200. Picked it up, loved it. Never seen a wrap done in it. Dallas and I are high fiving, and I look at him and I did the old what you just did. Said $3,200, dude, in 5 days. We're only making 350. We've covered payroll. I said, and Dallas goes, "What's wrong? You look pissed." I was like, "Yes, I, yes." And I said, "We've only got 4 weeks in a month, bro. So what's $3,100 times four, right?" I said, "So you're telling me we can only do 12.2, 12.5 a month? Like I know we're just starting out." Um, and then I remember bookkeeper calling us in like November and saying, "Hey, you've got $2,800 left in your operating account. You're all getting paid this Friday, but I've got a bill of like $3,800 for ink and material. What do you want me to do?" And man, it hit me like I come from my dad's a banker, retired banker. I mean, he was thrifty as can be. Like it money, you counted every little nickel you could. Very financially well, but was raised in a strict financial kind of home. And I got that from him. So I was a nervous wreck, man. Come Monday morning, you remember the cell phone company Cricket? Cricket, I think they're still around. They had called us about wrapping some vehicles in the 2005, and they went ahead and wrote us a check for 10 grand, dude, to get off their books.
5 years ago, when I first started my journey in growing and scaling my wrap shop, I could not find business resources or
a plan slash recipe of exactly what to do in order to grow and scale my business to hit that $1 million mark. And if you are looking to get around other wrap shop owners and be introduced to fundamental principles within our industry of things to do that will help you grow and scale your wrap business, then sign up on the link below. Book a call with me if you have any further questions. But this is not your traditional 8-hour class. You're left to your own devices. This is 3 months with myself, John Duver, and Dan Workman, plus an accountability group of the other people that are in the class. And we deep dive different subjects for 3 months, making sure that it instills a habit within your business. We identify problems within your business, and we actually help you grow and scale your business. This is very important to us. So again, if you're having trouble scaling your business, sign up below. Back to the podcast.
And that check came in 2 weeks later. The 10 grand came in 2 weeks later. And that was, knock on wood, man. I got to find, that was the only time in business, Brent, in 20 years that we really had like a, oh crap, like, what are we going to do? Really? And I think maybe that was my wake up call to really like, um, keep it tight. Because a matter of fact, we went in there a year and a half at 350 a week, bro, just to keep it as tight as possible. And my goal was to get to a $10,000 average daily balance, 10 grand. And then my next goal, the next 6 months was, can we make it to 20? Can we make it to 30? You know, I remember when we had $25,000 in the bank account, dude, I was just like, yeah, party on. You know what I mean? Bills paid. We got 25K. I got $400 in my checking account. Not personally rich. I'm still not
I got you. Well, I learned this from somebody else, but it was one of my customers, and I was like, "Man, you're so cheap." And he said, "Hey, man, if you take care of the pennies, the dollars take care of themselves."
rich.
And you know that lesson didn't hit me until about 5 years later when I was in a situation. But it's true. The little tiny incremental spending is usually, or like those little expenses that don't seem like a lot, amount to a big deal across the whole year.
Mhm. They really
Um,
do.
but I heard a couple things in there. I mean, uh, you said you're driven by fear. I really like this terminology because there's this lens or frame of mind that I've heard that, are you driven or are you dragged?
Mm,
Meaning, like, you could be dragged by a chip on your shoulder. You could be dragged by like this judgment of your dad, like from growing up, whatever it may be. Like, that's not really drive yet. That actually that's not a choice.
mhm.
I kind of always considered driven to be a choice, not a mandate, because you have to make payroll, right?
Yes.
But I do love the principle from it though, that do whatever it takes,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the critical thinking. I think I've always said entrepreneurship might as well be synonymous to masochism. Like, we
Yeah.
we will treat it to the highest level. But I think that you had this shift in mental state too, though, that, and I never put words to it until recent. I heard a talk by a guy named Kevin Nations, but basically he said that you care about your business more than it cares about you. Frankly, your business doesn't even have an emotion. It didn't care whether you showed up for 70 hours a week or not. It only cared about the result. It didn't even care about that, but basically you either get results or you don't.
Mm,
So, and I've enjoyed that too, because that's elevating your standard of like, well, I'm doing all these things and all this story that you tell yourself of like, well, I just got to get here, but you're never actually solving the problem. So I want to go into like you guys starting to stack money. Like, what was the like I understand the reason for, but like what did that do for you and Dallas over the next several years of business? Like, obviously 20 years in business, you've had more than that. Was your only major scare because it was a negative zero balance on the sheet. But what did becoming a lot more fiscally responsible did did that do for your business? Like having that cushion And then did you have any games that you played? Like I've always called it zero. So basically, like I would take 6 months worth of bills, and that was my zero. The minute I hit that dollar, I'm only at $0. So I'm not even company rich at that moment.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, I think I, we talked about this before we you hit record, and we'll talk about it again. But it was we all look at it. I don't know about you, but I still this day I look at the bank account at least 3 times a day. I look at it in the morning. I look at it in the afternoon. I look for it before I go home. We all know your bank account's not your true net worth, right? Because you've got accounts receivables, you've got stuff that's been written out, not cashed through, but it gives you a kind of a baseline of where you're sitting. Um, and I can remember not knowing the score. I remember a business coach asked me, we talked about P&Ls, right? Doing a P&L every day, right? Or a P&L on an individual job. But I didn't know our true score. Where were we in the year? Were we up? Were we down? What were our margins? I mean, I knew what our margins were, but you don't know what they are until the dust settles, right? You can price everything out how you want it until the dust settles. But not knowing the score of what we really had to do was a big eye opener of having interactions with business owners and talking about your P&Ls and what, hey, Matt, how was last quarter versus last year? People can tell when you're BSing, man. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't have that immediate answer or you can't describe it, and it became awkward for me, especially when I'm out teaching business. And knowing my true score, but internally knowing that it's a roller coaster, meaning that 20, 30 grand comes in and 20, 30 grand comes out, and it continues to do that. And by the end of the year, your numbers are still the same. You haven't lost money, but you haven't gained any money and you haven't gained any fuel to actually build your business. And for me, that was devastating because I kept saying, why are we doing this? This is the one thing I tell my clients too, and even the students I teach is the day that I have to print and install vehicle wraps at $5 or $6 a square foot, and if someone's doing that now, I totally understand. I say, I'm gonna go out and cut grass. I'm gonna go buy a lawnmower and I'm just gonna cut grass, man. That's what I'm gonna do. Because there's too much involved in this. So going back to that, the smartest advice that I ever got, you said you played the zero game, which I like. Um, I coach basketball. I've been a big basketball player. I love basketball. Actually, still playing in the 40 and over league tonight. But I play every day, every week as if we're behind. So if our weekly goal is a certain number and we crush it, we're still even to me. That doesn't mean we sandbag the following week. To me, it's just extra icing on the cake. I don't look at it as reserve either. Like we can slack off the next 2 weeks because we had 10 grand more revenue come through. You can't play that game because it'll come back and bite you. And it'll bite you for viciously. So the best advice that been given the past 3 years was to go and try to find, not try, to find your break even number. What's your true break even number? Building, expenses, labor. What's that number? And I'm going to tell you what, that was not a fun conversation because the number that I thought, the score that I thought was off by about $21,000 a month. That's a big screw up in score. Would you agree? So what I was taught to do is we found that break even number, and my guy told me, he goes, "What happens, Matt, if every month you break even, right? But in December you fall below the line. You're 10 grand shy on your break even number in December. How do you think your year would look?" And I said, "Well, I would say we're 10 grand in the hole for the year." And he said, "You'd be absolutely correct." So what we did was find the break even number and we padded and built in a 15% margin into that number. I know that's necessarily a fake false number, but my team knows that number though. Know the padding, but my team, they may know now listening to that. It's not a secret. That way too, if we're hitting break even number each month, and even if December we have a negative month, on paper in our numbers, we should have a little bit of profitability at least at the end of the year to survive, right? And we didn't lose any money. Our nest egg didn't go away. We didn't take away from that, but it also allowed us to look at the big picture and see how we can grow. So once I started seeing the account increase, it gave me in Dallas more confidence to go out and get more business. It gave me in Dallas more confidence to say, maybe we can find somebody that's not 15 an hour. Maybe we can afford us 18 an hour person now. Maybe we can finally do a little bit of advertising. But I think the smartest thing we ever did was, I love that statement too. And you want to bring it up, you can, about you had 2 months of profitability, right? Um, you thought, yeah, right, and this genius guy, this successful business owner, asked you, what'd you do with all the cash? You know, um, and for me, it was, we're bagging it. We're not touching it, because I'm the kind of guy too that if I go, I'm not a big gambler, but if I go to a blackjack table with $100 bill and I somehow win my 100 back, I take that 100 and put it to the side, and I do not touch it. It's no longer in play. So if I lose everything else, I'm leaving that evening with $100 that I did not lose. I was not going to lose. I was taking the gamble to sit down and gamble, but if I won it quickly, I kept it. And that's kind of how I based kind of my life on a little bit too. It's just, I think it's probably like you said, from my dad instilling in me um, how important money is, and also to seeing other business owners that had a boat, that had a jet ski, that had a lake house. But then I would go to their house, or I'd see how they lived, and I'd see their business, and the guy couldn't pay his rep. And what happened was he was just pulling all the money out of his company into his personal life and using that to live this certain lifestyle that they either wanted or felt like they had or deserved, or whatever the case may be. But I saw them as personally rich, but business poor. And I always told Dallas, I better have crap loads of money in the business and have enough money to live comfortably. But if we ever needed it, we could pull from the business, right? But I definitely don't want to have a bunch of personal money in the business not making any money, because then I don't have anything to feed that beast. Um, and I exactly right. It's an insurance policy. Um, and I have, everybody has their vices, right? But I mean, I'm a tequila guy. I like tequila. I'm not a full drinker, but I drink on the weekends occasionally. But when I drink, I drink. I don't have a beer, wine every night, Monday through Friday. It's not me, and I understand why. But man, it's crazy. Is if my week wasn't good or our month wasn't good, I don't partake. Things have to be good in my life for me to enjoy, or to even to have that different mind kind of alteration, right? Anything you want to do, like I have to, things got to be good. Like if I have a bad week, or the account gets low, or we have a bunch of expenses that go out and I'm not seeing it being replenished, I'm working on this of trying to be more positive. But my wife will go, "What's wrong with you?" I'm like, she said it was a good week. I was like, it was, but I just had 40 grand go out for this and 27 grand for that. And then we had this go, and then we didn't hit our numbers last week. And I'm just kind of, it's a slow time. And it just, and I cannot celebrate, cannot enjoy.
Yeah, I struggle with celebrating a lot of things. Like the team, w- we literally just sold a $1.1 million project. It's the biggest record thing that we've ever done. And I'm like, okay, well, what's next? Like, it was maybe the 36-second like hoorah, and then after that, it's like back to, that's just how my brain works, unfortunately. So I have to set aside time to celebrate the win. So
Mm, yeah.
um I have to be very intentional with that, unfortunately.
Mm,
But I have certain things that I definitely do that with, but not so much. It's weird in my personal life, not so much. I have a much easier time celebrating other people than I do myself. It's weird.
yeah. 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 And I think so too. Everybody's been through struggles. I mean, I was very fortunate, live in a very nice house. And I'll tell you one thing too, to not to go back on it, but my parents got divorced when I was 6, 7 years old. And with my parents, talking about transparency, my dad was required to pay for my college education. My mom wanted him to pay for my brother and I's college education. So I had my whole college, man, paid for in full, at Western Kentucky. And what did I do? I went up there and partied, man. I partied like a rock star, dude. I
Yep.
drank, smoked, barely went to class, got in fraternity, had no business being in it. Even got asked to walk on at Western. And then my lovely GPA of 0.8 came out. My dad, the banker, loved that, pulled me back home, gave me one more shot, and still couldn't do it. So
Mhm.
I spoke earlier about fear. I think the other thing too is I was a failure to myself and my dad for not finishing college. And that was my motivation too of this business. So I'm not going to let this business go out. I'm going to make this thing work.
And I'm not gonna let him say I told you you were a failure or
Yeah.
whatever that was.
And he
Yeah.
never did. My dad's a
Right, but in your mind, you held yourself to
oh,
that standard, right?
100%. And he never chastised me for that. But then I would meet people that worked at a bartender and then worked at a car lot to pay for their college, man, and went through 4 years and fought and got it done.
Right.
And here I am, had everything paid for me and didn't take advantage of it.
Well, you just received the lesson different.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like
Received it.
you received it how you probably need to receive it because like mine wasn't quite the same, but like I had an engineering scholarship and I went out west to play music.
That's fascinating. That's yeah, that's pretty cool, man. That's I had an opportunity to play basketball. It was a partial scholarship for the Coast Guard Academy out in San Diego. And if I didn't want to be in the Coast Guard for 5 years after, my dad was a retired lieutenant colonel in the Army. But looking back on it, I wish I had. But I can tell you, if I'd moved to California from Kentucky at
Mhm.
18, I probably may not even have gotten into raps. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's like those different roads. You don't know how it takes you. You know what I mean?
1000%. I mean, that's it too. Like I always joke, my worst job was the job right before me starting a business.
Mm,
Completely
I
on
like that.
accident.
I
I
like
was doing motorsports in the Southeast 13 states, so we were doing, grassroots drifting,
Oh wow.
and, the guy I worked for, like, it was one of those situations where I was real gullible. He sold me a good vision of, like, I would be the operator person for this entity because he did have a physical ailment, so, like, this was why it was even more believable. He couldn't work the way he needed to, but he was very driven individual. He just had really bad habits, and we would go to events and he would try to cheat on his wife and he was maxing out credit cards and she was the breadwinner and all that stuff. And like, I was just like, this guy is going to screw me in a heartbeat if he ever had somebody be cheaper than me. And I mean, $400 a week is all I made. Like,
Mm.
I,
You had me beat by 50, but congrats.
barely, yeah. But he had me forging insurance documents for like Atlanta Motor Speedway, which they're aware of, so I can say that. But like, he had me forge insurance documents because he couldn't pay for it. And I literally sent him my email with the document after I doctored it in Illustrator and just said, "I'm only doing this because I need to eat and pay my rent this week."
Hmm.
And that way, like, I had some accountability, where, like, I knew it was wrong, but if I was ever get slapped with it, then, like, I had a very good reason and I made it known to my boss that, like, I don't agree with this. So it was a bad situation, but one person that I met running those events is the person who connected me to the person that I ended up being a partner with.
That's crazy, man.
So I don't regret any of it. So
No,
that's why I said you just received the lesson different.
yeah.
But
Received it different. Yeah, it's a very I like that a lot. It's kind of how you're experiencing how you take it, man. It's hmm. You got me thinking too. The story you just told, I've never told anybody this story, and I can see if I can condense it in a minute. But when I first started in the sign business and worked for the guy that I was telling you about for 5 or 6 years, I got tired of it and I wanted to kind of be more corporate, do more sales. I ended up working for the bank that my dad was a president of and did the teller stuff. It was one of the most depressing jobs I ever had, just because you would see people bring in money and deposit a $80 check and their account had 35 grand in it. And you're like, this guy's a piece of crap car, jeans on, but he's savings. I mean, just crazy. And it just was, I didn't get paid much at the bank, but long story short, the guy that I worked for um, was going to get bought out by another guy. And I had met this gentleman and he asked me to come back and work for him. Gave me a $4,000 signing bonus. Who gets a signing bonus in 2003 for
for real,
signing? And it's a sign company, not a rap company. Got the check, cashed it, living high on the life, started working for the guy. He had a Cadillac, had all these cars. He was a trust fund baby. He had a son that actually had paralyzed himself. He got drunk and jumped off a hotel building down in Panama. He knew that I played and loved NBA basketball, so his son would text me all the time and we would chat back and forth. Long story short, bills start not getting paid. Payroll starts coming up missing. The owner is gone taking care of his son down at Vanderbilt Hospital and all this stuff. Well, after a while, my checks start bouncing. And now I'm starting to be held accountable and I'm running the business. And I'm like, what is going on? And this guy, too, please know he's a trust fund baby. His dad's a multimillionaire, very private, doesn't like anybody. Finally, the fourth paycheck does not go. A third paycheck doesn't go through. And I finally get a hold of Mark. What's going on? I say his name. What's going on? My son's passed away. He passed away, and I'm down here taking care of this. I'm so sorry. I'm going to transfer money over to take care of this, take care of that. It wasn't a day later. His dad comes to the shop, never met before, and he's looking for his bowling ball. And I said, "Your bowling ball?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm in a bowling league." And I remember the secretary at that time looks at me, and we had this, what would a multimillionaire guy that lives a private life be doing in bowling, right? Why would you be in a bowling league? And I asked the guy, I said, "Hey, listen, before you go, I don't know if you heard from, I hate to say this, but I want to send our condolences, man, for your grandson dying." I don't have a grandson. What are you talking about? Long story short, this guy was a con artist.
Mm.
The son he had never was there. He bought a separate
Phone.
texting phone, and he was the one texting me, dude.
Wow.
All the keys that he had were stolen keys from high-end cars. His Cadillac was actually stolen from Enterprise down in Texas. Went to the local Cadillac dealership and stole the manual to put it. But anyways, long story short, I worked for this guy for 2.5 years, and when he screwed me over, I just left. Everybody they went into lawsuits and all this stuff. I just washed my hands of it. But I took the client list, man. All those
Yeah.
clients I learned were mine because they were doing business with me, not
Right.
them. And they were reaching out to me. So I took that same business. I would probably say 50% of those clients I have today.
That's awesome.
And that's from the boating industry and everything. So hopefully not to hijack the conversation, dude, but you had it just made me realize that I worked for a con artist, man, but I learned a lot, man.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's a learning lesson. I mean, there's a lot of things in that. Like, one is if you're an employee listening to this, I believed in a vision. You should believe in your owner's vision, like, right? But also be not gullible and make sure there's accountability. And the minute that there's no accountability, have a hard conversation and ask why. And bring the faster you can have, like, I firmly believe a lot of people are just a couple of hard conversations away from severe success. Like, people avoid them, whether it be an owner to an employee. Because I mean, I've had similar experiences with I think a lot of people do this, the sandbagging, the momentum shifts. People don't understand how much, if they could figure out, I've never done it that way where I figured out exactly what my break even was, because I just did the math differently. But I like that idea because then you know what it is. And I think the 15% margin is actually not even lying or skewing the numbers. That is a 15% emergency fund for in case the printer breaks tomorrow and you have to buy another one.
Mhm.
It's actually surplus to ensure you don't go negative in case emergency occurs. But we did that in our Nocatee shop. I mean, we would have a great month, and then the next month would be off the gas, and then a great month, and then off the gas. And the person that was accountable for that shop, there was a while that I just accepted it as it was, but it wasn't acceptable. And so we finally did something about it. And it has to make money. At the end of the day, a lot of people don't understand that the entity is a person. And if the entity does not receive positive cash flow, then it's not going to take care of you.
Mhm. No.
And so you have to treat it as if it's got a bank account on its own and it has to go up. And it's okay for it to go down a little bit, but it always has to be positive.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, that's really good. But let's talk a little bit about efficiencies, because you kind of dabbled in on that with the whole, it took you guys 5 days.
Mhm.
Um, what are some things that you guys do in your business to increase efficiency outputs, or what are some lenses that you guys look through? Because I know that you guys are a highly effective business. Like,
Right.
I don't know what you guys' goals or aspirations are, but I think they're kind of similar to mine. I'm not looking to take over the world with an 8-figure wrap shop.
Mhm.
I want to be what I call a little giant.
Mhm.
I want to be a monster in my market. I want to be scary and dangerous, but I do not want to run like a national firm. Like, it's just not fun to me. And if I did do that, it would be more horizontal, where like I create successors, and I own or finance a location for them to then create their own vertical, but it'd be very horizontal platform versus vertical.
Hmm. Yeah. I remember used to hear people go, "Hey, this guy here, man, he's got a $4 million landscape company. This guy's got a $10 million, concrete company." You hear those numbers, right? And you young and dumb, or you're just like, golly, this guy's, I'd love to have something like that. Then you meet somebody personally that does have a 5 million, this is true, $5 million a year revenue landscape company, 130 employees, and they're complaining about how they made 82 grand in profit, dude. And when I heard that, I'm thinking, can you imagine billing out $5 million in whatever product or service you're doing only to make 80K? Didn't lose money, but you did. I mean, you did lose money to me. If you only made 80K, you're losing ground. You're losing momentum. You're losing that because 80 grand with 130 employees doesn't even cover the payroll, man. Doesn't
I
even.
mean, 5% net profit's 250K, to put it that into perspective. So it's like it's like a 2% net profit.
It's like a point 0.8, like my GPA in college. Is that what that is? Um,
Yeah.
that was a big wake up call for me too. The other wake up call was, I realized, I remember one month, I think it was back in 2010 or 11. Um, we did, like, to me back then, we did 60 grand in a month. You know what I mean? And I was like, holy crap. And the numbers were pretty good. The next month we did 58, and I was pissed. I was so pissed that we'd missed it by 2 grand. And then I looked and got with my business owner at that time, my financial backer, because I didn't know much about numbers. And we were more profitable on that 58 month than we were the 62. And that's when I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. How is that possible? You know what I mean? And then you start diving into these numbers. So you go back to your original question too, of like, your procedures, or how it took us 5 days to wrap a van. Um, the hardest part for me personally in business was you're wearing so many hats. You're having to go out and sell the job. You're having to design the job. You're having to quote the job. You're having to print the job. You're detailing the vehicle. You're installing it. You're making the invoice. You're calling the customer back and telling them to pick it up. And you're doing quality control. And you're photographing it. Then you're saving it. And then you get payment, or you chase down payment. And then you rinse and repeat and do that all over again. And you're just working out of fear, or working out of motivation, or working out of making your company grow. And then you realize that this is not going to sustain. I can't do all this every single day, and neither can Dallas. And it wasn't until we hired our first team member or employee, and letting the rope go, it was so hard for us, man. Letting the rope go and go, I know you're going to screw up, and I'm okay with it, is one of the hardest things as a business owner to do. Because you can't allow your business to grow until you let other people help grow your business. And until you can get out of your own way, is when we started seeing a big difference. The analogy that we've used, Brent, and you know this too, man. I mean, you're you're even more savvy than I am. I've been very impressed with your knowledge and information, and kind of how you kind of go after certain thought processes. I like that a lot. The psychology of life and business and friendships is big to me. I've really tapped into that. But the one thing I heard too is, when you used to go to a doctor, right? You go to a doctor and check in, and the doctor would come in, and they might spend 20, 30 minutes with you. Now it's, you check in with somebody at the front desk, and they call you in another room. Somebody else comes in, takes your blood pressure, weighs you, right? Then they escort you to another room where somebody else comes in and gets why are you here today? Make sure this is that. And then the doctor comes in for what, 5 minutes, 8 minutes, right? And what I've been taught, and what Dallas is, that's touch time. So what we call our installers is we call them doctors.
Okay.
They're our surgeons, because they're the gold miners of the company. Yeah, we got to sell it and design it and print it, but our installers are our gold miners. So the less time they're detailing a car, or removing glue, or having to take the trash out, or have to trim prints or whatever, the more they're touching, the more efficient and the more productive we are. And that's the big, and this is still ongoing. We are still going through this right now. I mean, as soon as you make a lot of changes, you let them sift out, then you got to go back and change it again. It's not done. it's only the beginning. And that was another hard thing too, you think you got everything good to go and then it falls apart. Um, and I'm sure you've experienced this too. And this is I think anybody that listens to this can appreciate this or understand this, is that what's fascinating to me is we've had times where we've grabbed our entire group together as a company and encouraged them, had a lunch, had some drinks. You feel the camaraderie, you feel the culture, even given a couple people raises, and you're clicking. And 3 days later, it's like it's had the opposite effect. People are showing up late. The consistency's not there. It's almost like the more energy you put into something sometimes has that reverse action. And I jokingly said to my team one time, I was like, I almost feel like I need to give you guys a pay decrease for you to increase your productivity. Because sometimes it has the complete opposite, uh, issue. So back to being efficient too, man, is I love, and we talked about this, is SWOT analysis, man. What are our true strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are our opportunities, right? And what are our threats?
Yep.
And the best thing that we ever did was we actually asked our team these, not just the owners.
You're supposed to ask your team these.
Yeah, that's who's answering this question, man. Is what are our strengths? And to hear that from the people that work with you every day on what they think your strengths are, and then what your weaknesses are, and you go, man, he is 100% correct. Now we're all buying in. Now we're really trying to figure out these are our weaknesses. How do we fix this? And it lets everybody buy in. Um, I'm actually more impressed now. We try to do more SWOT with our team than we do even our quarterly goals. Our quarterly goals with our team, we incorporate with them, but we get more out of our SWOT than we do anything else. It's amazing. But the problem we're having too is just being consistent with it. Making sure that we're
It's
staying.
hard. It's hard to stop and sharpen the axe. Like it's
It-
so hard. You don't want to, because like, I mean, you get this big account, or you get this like one-time opportunity, and you get all these things, or you get this tight deadline, and you don't want to stop.
Mhm. Yep, you don't. You're absolutely right. So it's tough. It's I've learned this too. I've read about it too. It's like, you gotta slow down to speed back up. Like, and in business and life,
Well,
everything. That's tough.
so there's a cool analogy to the slow down and speed up, and I'm kind of learning that a lot. It's the most patient game that you have to play. If you look at weightlifters or bodybuilders or something like that, so the best bodybuilders, I have no interest in bodybuilding, by the way, but I love this idea. Um, you basically see them during off season bulk. So they're not all cut up, and they have to not see this certain image that they are going to be. When they arrive on the Olympic stage or whatever that is that they're arriving to, they are actually at the highest peak point that they can possibly be. That doesn't mean that they've been at peak the entire time.
Mhm.
You have to have times in which you slow down and focus on something different, or get more rounded, if you will.
Mhm.
So athletes during off season, maybe they don't, like runners, they don't run the whole year. They might bike instead to train some different muscles, to give the other muscles a little bit of break so they don't get injured, to prevent that injury that would then slow them down. So these are things that I've kind of just started like looking into with the crazy endurance running that I do, because I get a little frustrated sometimes with, like, why am I not progressing as fast as I can? And my coach is like, take Mondays and Fridays off. And I'm like, I could go get more miles. He's like, no, take them off. I was like,
You've
okay.
probably seen a big difference, haven't you?
Well, is it, yeah. And so eating, I'm down 20 pounds since November. I ate more.
Mm,
I was eating wrong. I was eating too little. My body's like, yo, you need to live. Like, we're going to inject you with this hormone that keeps you from losing weight.
mm,
I started eating more.
and losing more weight.
And I had
Yeah.
more energy, and it's the craziest thing. But in order to do so, you had to get over whatever you think it is, and you have to stop. And I have a cool story about SWOT analysis. Is I had a print tech. His name's Davey. He still works for me on a contract basis. But Davey was the quiet, introverted person, but cared passionately, right? And so when he speaks up, he's like from the heart, right? And we were having a SWOT analysis one day, and I was like, I feel like we're bleeding in the print room. Like we just have waste. We have this. I'm like, I'm blaming all this stuff on the print room. And he dead ass looked me in my eyes and said, it's hard to tell what the hell's going wrong when you're here putting band-aids on everything at night.
Mm,
Because I was
mm,
printing during the night hours, I was working extra. And so in order to actually solve what was going wrong in the print department, I had to let it bleed for like a month to identify what was actually building up. And it wasn't what we thought it was.
hmm Yep. And that's hard to do, right? 'Cause it's hard to let it keep bleeding for that 30 days, but it paid dividends for you. You know
It
what I mean?
gave us the feedback we needed, but we could never let the feedback happen whenever I'm just locked in on a podcast from 6 till midnight, working at night, just doing everything on my own because
Mhm.
it wasn't my responsibility. It was his.
Yep. Yeah, I remember when we hired first our coach, business coach, and we're on a treadmill, man, or a hamster wheel, just getting it. You know what I mean? And you know, his first thing was it was our numbers weren't great, but they weren't horrible. So he recognized that it wasn't necessarily a revenue thing, but it was more an internal thing of culture, of vision, of mission, knowing our score, how our team was organized, what our streams of revenue were, right? All of this stuff. And I told him, I was like, man, I feel like I'm drinking from a fire hydrant. Like I got all this stuff just coming at me, which is good. But and the one thing too was to really look at our pricing, like really like what our pricing was. And it wasn't so much this, am I charging the right amount for the wrap film or the install? It was, what about the cleaning time and the prep time and the hand washing? And did it really just take us an hour and a half to get all 4 badges off this truck? And did we charge for it? Right? Because I've always said this. I don't want to be like a cell phone company. I don't want my invoices to my clients don't have every line item on there. $70 to remove badges and
Mhm.
$65 to wash and $10 for alcohol, right? I mean, we don't do that. It's everything's kind of rolled in, but all that stuff we were leaving out. Um, and I had a client that had we luckily we did like 110 pickup trucks. They were just door logos and tailgate spot graphics, but we had to remove the Chevrolet logo. And I never charged for that. And now we charge $25 an emblem. I took $75 and times it by that vehicle, dude. It was $12,000 in badge removal. And I told the owner of the company I'm cool with it. I said, listen, I hate to do this, but I got to charge you this amount because it takes this much time. No problem at all. First 10 trucks, we remove them. Guess what he does now?
Doesn't remember.
He removes them for me.
There you go.
And actually, he likes it because it saves him money in his brain. I like it because I wasn't making a bunch of money off his $70, $60 anyways. And now we can get him done even quicker. So really, he's made me more money and he's happy.
Because you were breaking even on the thing that you were
We were
trying to sell that
breaking,
you didn't want
yeah.
to do. And
Told
like,
her, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like the math on it, people don't understand what 1 hour is per day. So 1 hour per day at $20 an hour is $4,400.
Mhm.
And I guarantee you, every one of your employees is at least giving up an hour
100%.
in waste. And that's just for just
My brain was blown when I realized that when I found out that my 40 work week for my team members, they weren't working 40.
Mhm.
My business coach says you're lucky to get 36 out of them, man. If you're getting 36 pure hours from your team members, you're winning. I was like, what? He's like, yeah. I mean, you got research time. They may look on YouTube to remove a door handle. You may not be in that full energy. And I was like, holy
Feeling
crap.
off today, like
Feeling
anything.
awful.
Yeah,
Yeah, we just had that conversation. I mean, I told my team recently, I said, man, no one here is 100% every day. I'm not. To as an owner, to ask all of you all to come in here with 100% consistency is absurd and unrealistic,
absolutely.
right? Would you agree? But I do require and hopefully demand that all I'm asking you is I want you here 90% consistent. I want you locked in 90%. I'm gonna give you the 10, 12% kind of gratuity type
Yeah.
of behavioral grace, right? Or show you some grace. But that's all I'm asking. That's all I'm asking. I said last Tuesday I didn't want to be here. I raised my hand. I didn't want to be here. It wasn't that I was mad. I just was in that funk, didn't sleep well, had gotten some stuff done. I couldn't focus, and I kind of wasted 3 or 4 hours in front of my computer on Tuesday, man. I wasn't happy with myself. Being
I
transparent.
actually I stopped working on those days.
Yeah.
I
On you just
on
cut it off.
whenever I'm completely off, I just shut it off entirely and just go do something else. because if not, I get very frustrated. Um, I get very frustrated, and like I said, because I already don't support enough wins for myself. But like, if I'm not locked in, I'll just go spend time with a girlfriend, or maybe I'll do a read. That's sometimes whenever like I found that I can get back on track. Sometimes maybe doing something for somebody else instead.
Mhm.
So like that's where those like when I post like who needs help, like that's my way of kind of getting back in the zone or focused on something, because then I get like a dopamine hit from serving somebody else is a way to get my brain back in line with what I'm trying to do long term. So that helps me get back in the zone sometimes, which is interesting. Or I'll just go for a run.
It's not to be Dr. Phil here, man, but like, dude, like, from what I've heard you say, I don't think you can celebrate wins until the dust settles years down the road. I feel like you can't. It's hard for you to, and I'm the same way, to enjoy that immediate win,
All
right?
right.
And here you are the one asking people on a weekly basis what your wins are. And I think you derive that from that, right? Like you get that passion from what other people's wins are, even though you know you have personal wins.
Mhm.
Do you feel guilty celebrating your wins?
Not necessarily. I don't know. I just feel like my dopamine triggers are different, and I think I've kind of trained myself to be like that a little bit. So it's been very hard for me to like wrap my head around that. Like I get more enjoyment out of seeing like one of my team members, he just bought a car, and hearing him say he bought a car from one of my other team members who's running the operation. She sold the vehicle to Riley, but Riley paid like 500 up front, and she's like, now if you ever struggle just let me know. It's not a problem. Like, we work here together. He goes, no, it's okay. It came out of my safe. So it was his side money, like, it wasn't even his bank account, like, just to
That's
hear that he's
awesome.
doing that,
Yeah.
hearing, one of my other guys pull me to the side and say, "Hey, like, I have 30 grand set to the side. I had nothing when I started here." Like, those are huge for me, and I get more out of that. So I don't know, I just kind of defer the gratification in a way. I do feel like my stuff does require. I don't know. I've always believed that my goals take care of themselves as long as I'm helping other people reach theirs.
Mhm.
So it could be like that lens that I look through. I kind of struggle with that, and
No,
I think I do celebrate. I just don't show it outwardly,
yeah. Yeah, I
um,
think,
the same as others.
yep. Like you said too, like you have that certain face you have, right? Too. That's one of my negatives is there. My emotions are on my sleeve, right? So you can tell when I'm angry, you can tell when I'm happy, or there are times too, man, where I'm kind of an outgoing guy, I like to joke and whatever. But if I'm not in that that mode and people see it, even my wife or sons, they think something's wrong. And sometimes I am quiet, right? Like I love the Seinfeld episode talking about men and women that Jerry talks about. He's like, you look at a brains, a guy's brain, sometimes they're not thinking anything. I'm like, what do you mean? Like,
Sometimes there's
there's,
nothing going
there's,
on.
but like my wife's like, there's nothing in my, like, how can that be? She'll say, I'm like, dude, I'm literally on the back porch right now, just like swiped. Like I'm just enjoying, just taking in, not thinking about anything, not worrying about anything. And those are the good spots.
Mhm,
Um, so even the building we're in, Brent, I mean, this is a lease to own. Took me 3 or 4 months to negotiate this deal. It was high stress. And
mhm,
when we closed the deal, Dallas and I went out and had a little bit of lunch, and I was like, this doesn't feel like I thought it was going to feel. I thought we'd go
exactly.
out and get a SUV and have tequila and party till 3 o'clock in the morning. And that happiness lasted about 45 minutes, and we were back in the office. And even my friends that I do business with now are like, dude, you don't seem like energized about your new building. This is a badass building. I was like, because we legally on paper own it, but we don't own it yet. And I don't,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And until then, and I probably won't even
And
sell it.
even then, you
I'm
still
not
won't
gonna
feel any
sell it.
different.
Mm-mm.
It's gonna
Just
be the
like on
same
your
thing.
Yep, just like on your big deal you had, and congrats by the way, is I think also too, you achieved that and realized not how easy it was, but like, dude, I just did that.
You mean
Like
tell you what my brain went to? Who is the avatar? How did we get them? How can we get another?
100% because you saw that process. You're like,
Mhm.
well, we can do that. I just showed my cards.
Well, it's also the adverse, which is I don't like being bent over by one client. So if this client just became a third of like revenue or the quarter of revenue, I don't like that feeling. So I want to disperse that across more clients because I'm about to, if I have to hire somebody, I never want somebody to be obligated by me and then have, because like every solution has a problem that follows it. That's the infinite game of business. Like there is no ever solved the problem. Sorry to the new business owners, but every time you solve a problem, it creates a new problem.
Mhm.
And so that's, I think that's unfortunately like where this critical mass happens in my brain of like, okay, what's the problem that comes from this? Like, let's start solving now and get ahead of it.
You're right.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Did you learn that from someone in the past? Did you have an experience?
I almost jokingly think it's PTSD from my mentor because like I don't understand his lessons. Like I told you, he was crazy chronically successful. He did have the foresight, and I do appreciate this greatly. That day one, and I didn't realize this is what he was doing. He was priming me for really what I wanted. And he was just like, what do you want in life? What does that look like? How much money do you want to make? All that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, that's what this question was. And how are you going to get there? And I pondered that question for basically until now. And like I'm still not answered, but I'm closer than I have ever been to answering that question because he did follow it with, I sacrificed so much. I sacrificed my kids' childhood. Like to get where I got to, I sacrificed everything. But I want you to know I regret nothing. This made me happy. That might not make you happy.
Hmm.
And I was like, damn. Because I have somebody in my proximity that I see, like you're talking about the landscaping company. I have somebody in proximity that I could be easily swayed by as a
Mhm.
23-year-old, entrepreneur being mentored by this person. And he's like, don't look at me and model me. To the extent that the first time I asked him, I was like, hey, I think I want to buy some real estate for my building. He goes, what's your revenue again? I was like, 1.5 million. He goes, I didn't even look at real estate until I was at 30.
Mm.
And he goes, what's your net worth? I was like, I don't know. And he goes, so why would you put half your net worth into a building?
Mm.
And I was like, he goes, put it into your business. It'll give you a better return.
Yeah.
And like, but that's how he was. Is so like every time I got excited about something, it was like I got swatted down in a way. And so I was always solving the problem to respond to him
Yeah.
for,
'Cause
because like it didn't matter what I did. There was always a question. There's
Mhm.
always a question. I was always solving for what he was going to ask. And it was not always what I thought it would be. Sometimes it was a congrats. Sometimes it was a left hand. Like you didn't understand what you were going to get. And so I
Well,
think he ingrained that into me a little bit.
no, I like that a lot, man. That's awesome. And timing is everything too, right? Like, we've been business 20 years. I feel proud about that. I'm happy about that. But when we finally got this building, I thought when we spent $490,000 in rent in 10 years at our other building, I'm thinking that's a $500,000 that we could have invested into property. And my dad said, "Son, you can't base that on that. You that's the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
You weren't ready for a building 10
Correct.
years ago." You,
Well, that's the analogy of you can drop anybody. Like, let's just say there was a helicopter that could drop somebody off on Everest at the top. Your body wouldn't sustain the pressure and the lack of oxygen. So you have to go through the experience to at least be tempered enough to deal with it. And that's why people that win the lottery. So this is actually a fantastic lens to look at. And I never thought about it. So in one of my masterminds, there was a guy, he came from nothing, from the projects, he's all these things. And he really got thinking deeply one day. He goes, how hard was it for me to change? I was talking about employees and dealing with like the problem of like, you see their potential, but they don't want to grow. Right.
Mhm.
Think of how much personal turmoil and hardship you had to go through just to overcome, and how few people can actually deal with that pressure. And so, like, people who win $1 million, in this case, the story was I bought this guy a car, I helped him with his situation, like he had everything good, and then they go and throw it all away. It wasn't that they threw it away, is that their identity did not match what they were receiving. They did not feel worthy of the thing that they have. So therefore, the people who win the lottery, they spend it all because they are not worthy of the money that they received.
Mm.
They
Yeah.
don't feel that they are actually owed that.
Yeah.
Even though like mentally it's an identity issue.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, that goes back to the whole psychological and just mental side of of life, not even business, but that's very intriguing. I mean, and my dad always would tell, he'd always had these one liners, you can't eat the elephant all in one bite. You know what I mean? It's
One bite at a
little bites
time.
at one bite at a time. He used to always say too, once you squeeze the toothpaste out of the tube, you can't put it back in.
No, you can't.
It always stuck with me. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
be careful what you say to people, what you do. You're squeezing all that out. You
Mhm.
know, it's crazy. I mean, you talk about learning from the job that you had, right? You want to diversify a little bit. I mean, the three things I learned from the con artist and the sign guy was the reason why the con artist bought the company out is that the guy that I worked for didn't pay sales tax for 7 years and use that as leverage to con him to buy his business. Well, guess what? I've never not paid my sales tax. That's the one. I mean, I learned that. I was like, if I get in business, I'm making sure I'm paying my sales tax.
Mhm.
The other thing too that he did was, to me, was a jack of all trades, master of none. So we did graphics, signage, heat press, mouse pads, website design, garments, all this stuff, and we weren't good at any of it. And
Mhm.
his philosophy was, well, if we're slow here, we can pick it up here. If we get slow here, pick it up here. But I was like, we're not even in a lane. You know what I
Nope.
mean? Like, we're not in a lane. I get it. It makes sense. But the most, to me, successful restaurants have the most limited menu. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Go to a cheesecake factory, cool. It's popular, but that thing's a book.
I
I mean,
can imagine being a chef there.
can you
Uh,
imagine? But that's a whole other
well, I
conversation.
was gonna ask you, in y'all's efficiencies, did you guys end up cutting products from y'all's business? Because that
Yeah.
was one of the best things that we ever did in our business,
I,
and we're now, especially like, so we got the big deal again. We said the December 31st, 2025 is the last time we will ever touch 10 or PPF. We will do it for returning customers right now. We are no longer advertising it. We are no longer pushing it. And the only time we will even touch tint at all is if there's PPF, ceramic, like if there's another item with it, but by itself as a line item, we don't touch it.
mhm,
Um, and the reason for is because there's better time spent hunting down that avatar.
mhm. Yep. Uh, I hate to be, oh, I wrote this, but I think that one of the best articles I ever wrote, in my opinion, was The Power of No.
Mhm.
And our bank account, our revenue didn't change until we learned to say no.
Mhm.
And my main basis for that was I was fearful that if I said no to wrapping the guy's motorcycle, that we would
He
lose.
wouldn't use you for everything.
And
Yep.
he would use me for everything, and then he would badmouth me, and I would say yes to it, or chrome deletes, or wrapping motorcycle helmets, or wrapping stuff that didn't need to be wrapped. And then you're there at the shop till 3 o'clock in the morning, and then it's a continuous cycle, and until you learn to say no. Now, I've had the opposite business advisor to tell me that you don't ever say no, Matt. You make the client say no. So if you don't want to wrap that motorcycle and it costs $1,500, tell them it's 5 grand.
Yep.
And I said, I get that, and I like that. But I also don't like to be on the receiving end of that, because I've just had that happen to me recently on someone wanting, and I had a quote for putting AC in the back warehouse, and it was 4 times the amount.
Mhm.
I was like, dude, just tell me you don't want to do it. You get what I'm saying? Like, I really got a bad,
It feels like a middle finger to me,
it is a
personally.
middle. And so that's why I don't like giving someone I'm gonna give you a price if I don't want to do it, but saying no helped tremendously. And you just mentioned it too. We stopped doing PPF this year. We're done with it.
Yep.
It just was not. It was not making any money. It wasn't being. It wasn't a good adaptation to our business. So, um, your question, we probably at one point we had 9, almost 10 streams of revenue. We are down to 6 now. So we have 6 streams of revenue that we focus on. We got rid of 3 of them. It's also helped out tremendously.
Staffing, everything, marketing.
Staffing, focus on what you're doing, procedures. I mean, and I've learned something really interesting too. Whether you like him or dislike him, either was heard Elon Musk recently talking about procedures. He's talking about this, about how you go in and you not necessarily cut fat. It's not about the government, with business. I'm about, even with Tesla, you add more procedures in, or you add more stuff in, you have to remove some stuff as well,
Yes.
right? And that's the big tip. So the more we're going to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and then, but if you're not removing some of that, it actually does the complete opposite. You
Yeah.
can have too many procedures, too many rules, too many checks and balances, where you lose sight of what's really going on. And I thought that was key too, as well. But um, learning from your mistakes, seeing people not pay sales tax. I met a guy when I first got in the side business too that had gotten the Kentucky lottery contract. I was jealous, man. It's the first time I had jealousy in business, right? Like, but that was all his eggs in one basket, man. And he lived high on the hog for 4 years
So
until
it went
one
away.
day they literally said no more. And he had no business. I mean, he literally sold up shop. We bought some equipment from him. And I learned from there too. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't just rely on one good client. I mean, that can really, it's a temporary, to me, a temporary success by getting just one good client. It can
Absolutely.
spell disaster. So, but anyways, man, I think the other thing too, Brent, I'm sure with you that the thing that's been more rewarding for me, not only helping our team and training people and doing our classes, is being 48 and now really realizing that I still have a lot more to learn. I've got a lot more growth to do. I've got a lot more things that I really have to sharpen my iron on and continue to do so. And I don't think there was a point where I thought I had it, but I think I felt very comfortable in my own skin and what I was doing. And once I stopped and just slow down and look at what I was doing, it's like, this is not the right way, man. Like, I got a lot of holes in my game. I got a lot of gaps. I got a lot of things that I'm not good at. And that's a big thing too. You talk about checking yourself is you always think you're good at something because you enjoy it. When you hear from your SWOT analysis that you're really not good at it, man,
Yeah.
that's a wake up call.
Yeah.
It's a
This has been a great conversation. We'll probably have to come back to another one with you. Because
well, I appreciate you having me on. We've hit so many ping pong back and forth.
yeah,
Like,
that's
I
my
almost feel
style.
like if we do it, we need to have a topic or two to stay on task, man. So hopefully it wasn't too much rambling, dude. But I thoroughly enjoy talking to you, man. I mean, you're massive respect to you and what you have done, what you continue to do, and also to your passion for this industry. You can see it, you can feel it, and the word I started using word of the month, right? I try to pick a good word that I use with the team, and for you too is the word genuine.
Yeah.
I
That's been a superpower for me is transparency and like like my mentor would always say, you don't need to tell people everything. I'm like, but I tell people everything. Like it's just me. Like I'm
you and I,
sorry.
you and I are the same way, Dave.
Like
That's crazy.
well,
So
where can people find you? Do you just in case anybody doesn't know, do
yeah,
you guys do business training courses?
we do
Leadership
business training.
design.
Yep, we do inside the wrap shop. We have it here in Louisville, Kentucky, 5 times a year. You can go on our website, www.digitaleffectswraps.com landing page, click on the classes, go to that. We have a pricing and marketing class. You want to come in for one day, learn how to price not only wraps but graphics and how to sell with confidence, how to interact with your clients, how to increase your revenue. We've got a day 2 of design and templating, and then 3 and 4 is hands-on. A lot of stuff out there in the industry now to get training. It's become very not saturated, but there's a lot more resources to go after. And then we are working on our an online platform too, man. So it's
Awesome.
kind of a curriculum class to do not the hands-on, but do some business, not coaching, not Tony Robbins, but to talk about you know um, everything, the power of no, why margins matter, how to do upsell, and then we're going to do a design class as well. So that's our bread and butter with our classes. But man, I've learned too is I've been more excited, energized to get the business back to running more than the training. You know what I mean? Because the training helped us stay afloat for a long time. So now I'm trying to reverse it. But I appreciate the time. I appreciate this opportunity, and I appreciate you asking me to be on this wonderful podcast with you.
Thank you, sir. We'll see you on the next one.
Hey, be good and go get your run in, will you?
I will.
All right, man. Take care, buddy. Thanks again.